Okay, Daniel again.
Daniel again.
Clearly Daniel was a folk character of great interest. He appears all over the place. Little Daniel stories, kind of a, you know, like
Brer Rabbit?
yeah. And he's always a hero, and he's wise, and he's shrewd, and he's in very close touch with God. He does miracles, all kinds of stuff. The book of Daniel is clearly written at a date very different from the date it claims to be written at, and that's very important to bear in mind. If you look at the very beginning of the book of Daniel, it dates itself, and dates itself falsely, you know, in a conventional way. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord, like King Jehoiakim of Judah, fall into his power, etc. That would put it in the 7th century. Now, as you read the book, you find that the author of the book knows very little about anything that happened in the 7th, or 6th, or 5th, or 4th, or 3rd century, but he brightens right up when you get to the 2nd. So when do you think it was written?
167 BCE.
So this, as I say, was a convention. It was often done this way, and to make the whole thing look like a prophecy. And the prophecy, if we assume it was written in the 2nd century, and was written, as Father Roy suggested, in the time of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, it's meant to encourage the people. You know, everything will turn out okay. Don't worry, it's awful, but it will get better. Very likely the book of Daniel is put together out of pieces, because the first half of it is so different from the second half. The first half is all interactions between Daniel and the king. The second half is Daniel as an apocalyptist, foreseeing the remote future, you know, the ultimate outcome, final judgment, etc. And they're in quite different styles. You know, maybe they're from the same document, but probably not. The one thing you do notice is that in the references to Babylonia, there's no suggestion that Babylonia was an awful place for a Jew to be. Daniel is a Jew, and he rises to the, you know, Secretary of State, or something like that, under the king. At the same time, the king of Babylonia is always, you know, getting upset or making some awful mistake, and this gets the Jews in trouble, and Daniel gets them out of trouble again. So that's very characteristic of it. Now let's just look at a few of the first things. What first things do we have here?
Now, historically, are we sure that Daniel really existed?
A Daniel really existed.
Somebody.
Yeah, somebody named Daniel, but you know what the historical Daniel was is anybody's guess. And mentions of Daniel go way back, and they even go outside Hebrew culture into other cultures. Incidentally, all these words, names ending in El, are Hebrew names from El, Elohim, God. The Babylonian names you'll find very frequently begin with Bel, Belshazzar, and so on. That's from Bel, the name given to Marduk, the god of the Babylonians, borrowed from even earlier cultures. Now you remember Baal, B-A-A-L in Hebrew, means God in a very general way, or sometimes means a pagan god. The word itself really just means the great Lord, and it could be applied to any deity. And but Bel, that form of it, becomes characteristic of the Babylonians. Now, we also get his little friends here, who turn out to be Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, as in the song, and they do sing the song in one of the Apocrypha here. We'll, when the musicians arrive, I'll do a little number for you.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
My husband, he knew the Bible backwards and forwards.
Uh-huh.
Came in a Mississippi farm is where he grew up crippled. And he went under the Shriners Hospital, and they fixed his club feet. They were like this, to where they were straight again. Then I met him, and he knew the Bible. He sold Bibles, family Bibles, big family Bibles everywhere. And he said he was talking about, we were talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they were walking around with Jesus in the oven. And so I said, Bill, how can Jesus be in the oven? He hadn't been born yet. I said, how do you know? He says, that's the Son of God. When you see the Son of God, you know the Son of God.
You look like the Son of God.
Pardon?
He said the fourth looks like the Son of God.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Like a Son of Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Son of Man, says God, Bill, in the
No, it's the Son of God.
Yeah, we talked about that whole Son of Man thing before, so we didn't get into that again. It's still very problematic.
Jesus.
Okay. Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, and Nebuchadnezzar was real, he was king of Babylonia, but later on, Daniel isn't quite sure who his son is, and he gets the wrong son. These are all indications for historians that he wasn't there. He was far from there in time. He dreamed such dreams as his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. So he calls in all his pagan consultants, and they don't quite do the job. And then Daniel is called in, and Daniel, of course, does do the job. Now, this first vision brings in something we find even in classical and Greek literature, this statue with different metals at different levels of it. In this case, what he dreams of is a statue with a golden head, with the shoulder area silver, the lower area bronze, and the lowest area, the legs and feet, are iron, but 1 foot is clay. And so we get the saying, he has a foot of clay, and so on. Now, it's quite clear what is meant by this. You'll find this pattern of 4 and 5s again and again in these visions that the king has and that Daniel interprets. This is looking back from kingdom to kingdom to kingdom. For Daniel, Assyria isn't in the picture at all. It's beyond him. Babylonia is the beginning of the history that he attempts to narrate. So it's Babylonia, then the Medes and Persians, first the Medes, then the Persians, they united ultimately. Then the Greeks, Alexander the Great, and then the split Hellenistic kingdom with the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. So given that, you can see a lot of the patterns follow that, 1 Babylonia, 2 Media, 3 Persia, 4 Alexander, and then 4A, 4B, Ptolemy and Seleucid, the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. So that applies here. And you look at these pieces, and what do you think the clay foot is? Antiochus IV of Ephesus.
The what?
Yeah, he's not gonna make it. And this is part of the reassurance, These empires were strong before, but Antiochus IV Epiphanes is going to be the weak foot, and it will collapse under or over him. So again, it's reassurance, but it does take this form. He never names names. It's always these symbolic figures, symbolic metals. A little while later, you get a vision in which you get a beast with 4 horns and then a little horn. Here again, 4 and 1. The same empires, the 4 horns are the big empires that we've had so far. And the little horn, who do you think the little horn is? Little Antiochus Epiphanes. So Antiochus Epiphanes is probably contemporary with the writer Daniel, and he's minimizing him. He's a horn, but he's going to shrink. He's a big statue, but clay foot, etc. So it's all a put down of him. And scholars have always asked, well, why doesn't he come right out and say it? Why didn't he say Antiochus IV Epiphanes instead of clay foot and little horn and so on? Probably everybody did know what he meant by this, and it was probably interpreted that way. But it may also have been a form of kind of evasion. You know, this is how we Hebrews talk about this, but we don't want those guys to know what we're talking about. That's a possibility too. Could be a kind of code. So that pattern, the 4, or then the 4 plus 1, and the 1 being a little one, appears again and again. We won't go through all the visions, I don't think. That's one. The second one. Yeah, they begin on the beginning of each chapter. That was chapter 2, 1. The second chapter, the second one is the fiery furnace. And here again, we get Daniel is not the star of this, but his 3 companions are. They refuse pagan ritual. Is always the pattern. Pagan ritual is imposed. Jews refuse to follow it. Jews are threatened. Jews are rescued. King is convinced the Jews have it right. And that's the pattern all the time. Which again is a reminder that the Babylonian monarchs were not thought of as, you know, terribly evil or anti-Jewish, but as pagans, and therefore they had to be taught. And these are all instances of their being taught. So in that third one, whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. That's a golden statue the king Nebuchadnezzar has set up. So naturally they are not going to do this, so they are thrown into the fire, and they love it there. The fire was absolutely delightful. They're strolling around in the fire. I mean, they look in, when he says, I thought we had 3 guys thrown in here. I see a 4th one. And the 4th one obviously represents an angel who is protecting them and taking a little stroll through the fire with them. Now, and of course they're therefore released, and once again the king is persuaded that their God must really be pretty good. So they're all stories of the king coming around, doing something very pagan, doing something cruel, but not necessarily deliberately cruel, and then being corrected by these miraculous happenings. Now that episode had a hymn in it, a song in it, which is the song of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It seems to have been a loose piece, and probably much older than the book of Daniel that we have here. And so in your Bibles it's likely to either not be there at all, or be relegated to some section in the back as apocryphal. The song of the 3 boys is a beautiful thing. It's a canticle both for Jews and Christians. Christians have sung it in Latin. Jews have sung it in Hebrew. And it fits. This is what they're singing, they're praising God in the fiery furnace. But it seems to have already been there, and then it was lifted and put in here because it fitted so well. Okay. We'll look at it if we have time. Now the fourth one. This is King Nebuchadnezzar to all peoples, nations, and languages that have that live throughout the earth. How great are God's sights! How mighty His wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and His sovereignty from generation to generation. Nebuchadnezzar, who was living at ease in my home and prospering in my palace, I saw a dream that frightened me. And he sees a dream that frightens him, and he has all his consultants come in to interpret it, and none of them are much good at it. But hey, we forgot Daniel. Hey, okay, on the hotline to Daniel, and Daniel comes right in and interprets it with no trouble at all, and it turns out to be pretty creepy. What Daniel tells him is that this is a prophecy that his kingdom is doomed.
Oh,
and not only that, but the king is going to have a rather strange experience. He's going to think he's a cow. And he's going for 7 years to be trying to graze in fields and things like that. Now, I did look up some clinical stuff on this, and this does happen. It is a known, actually cataloged. It's called a boanthropy, and it is a form of abnormal behavior in which one feels cow-like and wants to eat grass. So they may have actually done that, and that's what he's doing for 7 years.
7 years he's eating grass.
7 years he's crawling around. But they're actually, I mean, there are photos, clinical photos of people doing this. Going out in the yard and trying
It's actually happening.
Hmm?
It's actually happening.
It actually happens, yeah. It's rare, but it happens. They think that werewolves come from the same thing. Some people think they're wolves and behave as wolf-like as their repertoire.
A loup-garou.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that's the diagnosis on the king. And 7 years later he gets better and once again recognizes that the God of Israel is the real thing. The next one. It's pretty colorful dreams. Better than go to the movies. So in the fifth one, we get a new king, King Belshazzar, who is presented here as the son of King Nebuchadnezzar, but he's not the son of King Nebuchadnezzar. This is one of the clues that he was not really there. There was a Belshazzar, he was a regent for a while, but he was the son of Nabonidus and not of... So he has a banquet, and 5:2, under the influence of the wine, Belshazzar commanded that they bring in the vessels of gold and silver that his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple.
Uh-oh.
So that's the bad thing now. The sacred vessels are being brought in for his entertainment. And next thing you know, a hand appears on the wall and it writes these words. And the words are given to you in here, somewhere or other. Where are the words? So,
A hand appears on the wall.
a hand appears on the wall, and this, of course, is a lot of our sayings come from this book. Clay, he has a clay foot, the handwriting on the wall, and the handwriting on the wall is again prophesying the ultimate destruction of his kingdom. The handwriting itself is in recognizable language, and the words are, what are they?
25.
25?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
They make
mene
it- they
tekel
make it search for
parsin,
it.
meaning measured, weighed, divided. So Daniel has to interpret this, and he says it's a cinch. Mene, measured, means your kingdom has been measured to its end, it's destined to end. Tekel, weighed, you king, have been weighed. You're like merchandise and you've been found to be no good. So you're done for. And the third one, parsin, divided. Back to history again. What's going to be divided? The kingdom into the Medes and the Persians. They're coming up. You'll be the last Babylonian, and you'll be followed by the Medes and the Persians. So, once again, obviously the God of Israel has it right, but this king is not going to be rescued. And then in 6:1, these are very neatly arranged by chapters, we get the lion's den and a couple of other things. Here we know that Daniel has become so popular and famous that people hate him and want to discredit him. And so there's a conspiracy against him, and they try to think of some way we can get rid of Daniel. Now, the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which again is a saying in English, it's like the laws of the Medes and the Persians, meaning it cannot be modified, abrogated. Once the law is there, it stands, no matter how pernicious it turns out to be. And this was characteristic of the laws of the Medes and the Persians. They were very strong on rigid legalism. And they, as with all law, there were softer interpreters and harder interpreters. Well, the hard interpreters meant this law as it stands, there can be no ameliorating circumstances, there can be no diversion from it at all. It has to be done as it's done, as it's stated. So relying on that, the conspirators arranged for the king to promulgate a law with all the necessary legal accompaniments to make it a law of the Medes and the Persians that cannot be altered. And it is either you don't pray to anybody but the king for 30 days. These things are so strange. Don't pray to anybody but the king for 30 days, or you go to the lion's den. So Daniel is obviously, Daniel's sort of quiet, he just doesn't do it. Daniel never makes a fuss.
He's a pacifist.
He just doesn't do it. He's sort of a pacifist, yeah. But he's got all these other things doing the violence for him. And they point that out to the king, and the king, of course, is heartbroken because he likes Daniel, but the laws of the Medes and the Persians must stand. So, sorry about that, Dan, but it's the lion's den for you. So he gets tossed into the lion's den, and once again, as in the fiery furnace with the three boys, he's never found a pleasanter place in his life. It's great there. The lions are all purring and nuzzling.
They had just been fed.
No, they actually go out of their way to see how much they're normally fed, and that they had been made to fast, so they would gobble up Daniel immediately. But they go on fasting. And so the king recognizes this was a conspiracy, tosses the conspirators to the lions, who can now sate their appetites.
Yeah, and not only conspirators, but their children and their wives.
And,
I mean, the whole...
and their children and their wives, It's again.
Yeah.
Well, we see this all the time. I mean, punishments are, families are punished.
Yeah. We see it in Syria right now.
We do see it in Syria right now. And we saw it with the Israeli treatment of the Palestinians.
Right.
There's a Palestinian terrorist who's part of a family. They go in and destroy their olive groves, everything they have to live on, destroy the home,
happens.
Yeah.
But what happens to Daniel?
What happens to
When he
Daniel? He
gets
lives
out.
happily ever after.
He lives.
3 times the charm.
He goes to the seashore with his family. Now, there's no end of Daniel. There's no
Oh.
sad finale. Daniel just goes on.
Wait,
being
and
fine.
then Daniel's gonna have dreams.
Daniel gets dreams now.
Yeah.
Now, Daniel's dreams are a different kind. Daniel's are apocalyptic dreams. They're all about the ultimate outcome in which all these struggles and misfortunes and tragedies will be resolved finally according to God's will. So apocalypses always come about when times are bad, when people are scared. And a lot of social psychologists point out that's true right up until now.
Yeah.
You know, when there's some big scare going on. You find a lot of people walking in the streets with big signs saying, you know, Jesus is coming any minute and things like that. The judgment is upon us.
Jim,
Yes.
is there some, or is it used a lot, is there some connection with Daniel and the book of Revelations?
A lot, yes. So the Book of Revelation uses a lot of the
Oh, it
Daniel
uses a
imagery.
lot of it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, including the you know, the Son of Man and the Ancient of Days and all of that and more.
But it seems that there's a pattern there, like Joseph did the same thing for the king and interpreting a dream
Mm-hmm.
that he had had.
Right, right. So what are you suggesting?
There seems to be a pattern in Scripture.
Of a wise Jew interpreting dreams
Right, interpreting
for a non-Jewish
through the
king,
God of
and thereby
Yahweh.
impressing them. Yes,
Yes.
very definitely.
You talked about sometimes these things are kind of written in code, or they have a certain code to them
Yeah.
to say something
Well, one
without
thing is
exactly
to,
saying it. Is that to keep,
without being understood by the unsympathetic.
so that's what's said about the book of Revelations too, that it was somehow code that could have been an insurrection, could have been viewed as a problem.
Yes.
But it was told in this.
Yeah, it may have been well, I mean, it was anti-Roman. I
Right,
mean,
it was
you have
anti-Roman, yeah.
you know, Nero as the evil
Mhm,
figure
right,
in him. So,
okay.
So yeah, that's apocalyptic is strange. I mean it's hard to imagine that the people in general would understand it, and if they did understand it, you know, other people would hear about it too. It always has a kind of spooky atmosphere about it, kind of an otherworldly.
Definitely, definitely otherworld.
Yes.
The Bible is basic instructions before leaving earth.
In these passages, it is. Yeah.
And gospel is God offers sinful people eternal life, everlasting life.
Yeah, but not in the Old Testament.
No, not in the
No.
Old
No.
Testament.
No, that's where we are. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So why that particular apocalyptic language? You know, any guesses of your own? I mean, the one plausible guess is kind of it's our way of speaking, and those guys don't understand it. Kind of Christian code or Hebrew code, as the case may be. There's also, as I say, a lot of attention paid just to the atmosphere of it. In reading it, everything gets kind of very different from everyday life. There's an otherworldly quality about it. You're taken into another realm. It's you know, a little like science fiction in that way. And that would create a mood, an attitude, a receptiveness, and therefore make you perhaps more receptive to the message, which is always both threatening. Things are bad, they're going to get a whole lot worse, but ultimately salvation will come. Of course, that's led to all kinds of, many sects and cults and groups have grown up around that. That's one reason why certain groups rooted in apocalyptic love wars, because a war must be that awful thing that's happening before the good thing happens.
It gets worse before it gets better.
A lot worse, yeah.
That's been for ages,
Yes.
ages we've
Yes.
thought that. Do you think that's true?
No.
I don't.
Well,
No.
once the-
I think it gets better before it gets worse.
I guess it seems better after the war is ended.
Yeah, sure,
Oh, yeah.
sure.
It may not be better,
Better.
but it seems
And in the most apocalyptic, also the climax involves a great battle, a great conflict with both human and superhuman figures fighting one another. And at the end of that battle, there either is assurance of, or there actually is the accomplishment of, ultimate salvation. That, by the way, is where ISIS gets it. ISIS is apocalyptic, and it gets its apocalypse through Muslim sources from the Old Testament. Only there, it's Raqqa, the city of Raqqa. Raqqa is Armageddon. Their Armageddon. So Raqqa, the great last battle, will take place, and we'll win.
Isn't, to an extent, the people who hold on to the rapture apocalypse?
Yes, yes, very much so.
That whole because
Yeah,
it has
I mean,
to be a destruction and the good get raptured and the others,
Yes.
yeah.
The others are just left behind.
Yeah.
How many years?
Okay. That rapture, I mean, the word itself, rapture to us means kind of a, an outburst of enthusiasm or happiness. It was translated from the Latin, actually, raptos, which means snatched away.
Yeah, snatched
So it was
up.
snatched away from the conditions of unpleasant conditions of earth and brought into a better realm. Okay. Where have we got to now? Lion's Den. Okay. Let's just take a look at one of these visions, 8:1. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel. 3, I looked up and saw a ram standing beside the river. It had 2 horns. Both horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up second. Strange details. I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. All beasts were powerless to withstand it, and no one could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became strong. As I was watching, a male goat appeared from the west, coming across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. The goat had a horn between its eyes. It's a unicorn.
Oh, a unicorn.
It came toward the ram with the 2 horns that I had seen standing beside the river, and it ran at it with savage force. I saw it approaching the ram. It was enraged against it and struck the ram, breaking its 2 horns. The ram did not have power to withstand it. It threw the ram down to the ground, trampled upon it, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from its power. Then the male goat grew exceedingly great, but at the height of its power, the great horn was broken, and in its place there came up 4 prominent horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. So you're seeing this 4 plus 1 coming back again. Out of one of them came another horn, a little one. So working our way backward, that's Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes, the little horn that we know, contemporary with Daniel. And the other things are his reconstruction of the previous empires. And, they're not historically very reliable, but they're all kind of there. So when you read that kind of thing, you say, you know, who would understand this without an explanation? It's kind of hard to imagine. So the explainers would be the, and there now they were explainers, they would be, you know, perhaps self-styled wise men who said this is the vision and this is the explanation. So the pattern in them all, I don't see too much sense in spending time on the details, but the pattern of them all is there's been these empires. We're in the last one now, well, we'll be in the last one then, in that kind of post-dating thing. And that last one will be Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and he's a little horn, and he's not going to last, and then things will be better. Now, notice that Antiochus IV Epiphanes is still there. So this was written before he died and before the Maccabean revolt. So it was written in that atmosphere before the Maccabean revolt, when there was this tension between Hellenizers and anti-Hellenizers, and in which there was you know, great distress. We have this guy robbing the temple and so on. And you see some of those motifs brought in. I mean, in Belshazzar's dream, the temple plunder is what causes this vision and the announcement of his downfall. Well, Antiochus IV was a temple plunderer. So all of it anticipates Antiochus IV. But it's undoubtedly written either during his lifetime, during his lifetime. So Daniel did not know from experience how Antiochus IV Epiphanes would end or where Judaism would wind up. Okay. Now, you have other texts about Daniel in which Daniel's wisdom becomes kind of a detective's wisdom. And these seem to be much older than the book of Daniel we have here. And they're the ones that we know now as Susanna and the Elders and Bel and the Dragon. I'll just take a quick look at them.
And those are additional.
Those are additional, yeah, but actually probably much older than the book of Daniel itself.
Susanna and the Elders and what?
Bel and the Dragon. It's tucked back in the Apocrypha here. Additions to the Greek book of Daniel.
Yeah, this says it's from the Greek version of Daniel.
Right.
It sounds like Star Wars.
And and you have three things there. You have the prayer of Azariah, the Song of the Three Jews. That's the one with the fiery furnace. We won't look at that again, but as I say, the psalmody in it is very beautiful, very lasting. And then Susanna and Bel. So let's take a look at them. Susanna. Here again, the location is Babylonia. And interestingly, there's no suggestion here that there's anything wrong with Babylonia or the king of Babylonia or anything Babylonian. The bad guys are Jews. It's entirely within the Jews scenario. There was a man living in Babylon whose name was Joachim. He married the daughter of Hilkiah, named Susanna, a very beautiful woman and one who feared the Lord. So she is beautiful and good. Her parents were righteous and had trained their daughter according to the law of Moses. Joachim was very rich, and had a fine garden adjoining his house. The Jews used to come to him because he was the most honored of them all. So notice that this whole scenario implies that Jews were very comfortably situated in Babylonia, as indeed many of them were. And the meetings of the elders take place here at Joachim's house. And we find that two of the elders are very struck with Susanna. And
They were judges too, that's a high
Yes.
honor, wasn't that a high
well,
honor?
no, they're the elders are all judges. When they
Oh,
meet,
okay.
they all judge.
Oh, okay.
So they're embarrassed by this, but they're lustful all the same, and they don't want, neither of them wants the other to know. So at one point they go home, and then they say bye to one another. They go different ways, and they both turn around to go back to get a look at Susanna. And of course they meet and, oh, what are you doing here? I think I left my hat. So they now know that they're both in the same
Now,
way.
Susanna was Jewish?
Susanna was Jewish.
Okay.
Yeah, everybody in this is
Yes.
Jewish except for remote reference. So they
They're
wait
peeping
until...
Toms. They're peeping Toms.
They are indeed. This is sacred voyeurism. They wait until she is bathing. She thinks she's totally private. There's a garden with a gate, and she sends her maid to get better soap or something like that. And that means closing the gate, and they're hiding. Their moment has arrived. So they tell Susanna that if she won't have sex with them, they will announce that they came along, these are righteous elders, and we saw her having sex with another guy. And it's our duty, poor Susanna was sorry, but it's our duty to report this. And that meant, of course, that she would be put to death if they followed the Torah strictly. So that's what happened. Susanna is faced with this choice. Will I keep my reputation while losing my, I guess she's a virgin, virginity, and or will I go the other way? So she decides to scream. That's what she's supposed to do. That's what the Torah says. If you're threatened with assault, you should scream, and then people are likely to believe you.
True.
But they've thought of that. So yeah, she screams, they come, and the two elders pop up and say, we were just passing by. And we happened to notice that she was having dalliance with this young man. And, you know, we're really sorry about that. But Susanna, that we thought was so nice, is really an adulteress. So they feel terrible about that, of course, but what can they do except put her to death?
I'm sorry for you.
Any other suggestions?
Only have one choice.
And then Daniel turns up. Now this is Detective Daniel, wise Daniel, and Daniel says, wait a minute.
Good for him.
Let me have a little talk with these two guys. This is a Perry Mason style.
Separates them.
Separates them and asks the first one, okay, you were there, you saw this happening. Where was it happening? Under a tree, no doubt. What tree was it under? And he says, I think a mace tree.
Yeah,
He says, okay, okay. Then you go away, gets the other guy, and asks him, same question. He says, an oak tree. Gotcha. So that's the end of them. The witnesses are discredited. Susanna is glorified. The witnesses are punished with the punishment Susanna would have got. And Susanna and family live happily ever after. So you can see,
So what happened to the elders? Anything?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Put to
Oh,
death.
they're put to
Oh, they
death.
were, okay.
Yeah.
They were cut
Yeah.
in half, honey.
Really?
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's good.
Yes.
Sword to cut you in two.
and make you an end of you both.
So you can see the kind of character who's being developed here. It's, you know, it's a very smart and very good guy. It's somewhat different from the Daniel we see in the book of Daniel, who seems much more, you know, like, you know, visionary and kind of mystical and spookier in many ways. This is just a shrewd and pious man. Then Bel and the dragon. When King Astyages was laid to rest with his ancestors, Cyrus the Persian succeeded to his kingdom. Now this is the Cyrus who liberated the Jews, of course. Daniel was a companion of the king and was the most honored of all his friends. So, you know, Daniel really gets around. He moves time and space.
Yeah. How long is it between Nebuchadnezzar and Cyrus?
It's a long time.
Yeah, okay.
yes. He would be a very, very old Daniel. Yeah, a couple hundred years old. So again, Daniel is brought into the picture in that same role of the good, shrewd man. And in this case, again, you notice that Daniel is presented as on very good terms with the king, Cyrus. Remember, Cyrus is the one they call the Messiah at one point. But no suggestion that, you know, life in the Persian Empire was bad for Jews. He's not a persecuted minority, as indeed they were not. Daniel was companion to the king and was the most honored of all his friends. Companion to the king was an actual rank. It meant, you know, a very close group of consultants. So then the problem arises. The god Baal here, Marduk, is being worshipped. There's a statue of him, and the statue is fed each day. And this is one of the priest's assurances that Baal is actually not just a statue, but a living being. Food is put in there in his place, and then the door is locked. And when they come back in the morning, his napkin is folded, and he's had his breakfast or dinner, as the case may be. So, wow, you can't beat Baal. This is really a living being. Now, this clearly comes from the time when there was a new orientation in the Jewish attitude towards the pagans. It was that these idols were just nothing. They were fakes. They were just pieces of wood, bits of stone, bits of metal. And that's the perspective here. It is just a statue. Before that, that wasn't the case. They were inferior deities or spiritual beings who might be okay, but they were always subordinate to Yahweh. So Daniel comes along and unmasks Baal. How does he do it? He arranges for ashes to be put on the floor. The door is locked. When the door is opened again, they find footprints in the ashes leading from the door up to the dinner. And then they find out that there is a secret passage whereby a priest could come in and open the door and invite his family to come in and, you know, have a midnight snack with Baal. So, again, it's clearly the same Daniel, the kind of, you know, bright-eyed, clever, quick Daniel who sees through things.
But it was a big, big meal, and here it says 5 barrels of fine flour,
Yeah.
40 sheep, and 6 measures of wine every day.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, who could be eating that every
Baal.
day? You know, but 40
Well, that's why I say they brought the whole family.
Yeah, oh yeah, but every day?
Wow.
I think you detected a trace of exaggeration.
That's what I was wondering, they ate that every day. Oh,
They had takeouts.
They must have been feeling the whole countryside.
And they throw Daniel in the lion's den again.
Oh, really?
You'd know better by now.
He's always going to the lion's den, but he
Again.
gets out again.
I can't believe it.
So back into the lion's den with Daniel.
6 days.
This is dealing with the dragon.
Yeah.
Daniel took pitch, fat, and hair and boiled them together and made cakes, which he fed to the dragon. The dragon ate them and burst open. So that's Daniel's offense. When the Babylonians heard about it, they were very indignant and conspired against the king, saying, "The king has become a Jew. He has destroyed Baal and killed the dragon and slaughtered the priests." You notice that back in chapter 1, verse 1, we have Cyrus the Persian succeeding with his kingdom, and now we're back with the Babylonians again. So there's been a slippage here. Again, probably different documents were put together without making that adjustment. Oh, the king has become a Jew. He has destroyed Baal and killed the dragon, slaughtered the priests. Going to the king, they said, "Hand Daniel over to us, or else we will kill you and your household."
That's something.
So this is a threat to the king himself. So they threw Daniel into the lion's den. He was there for 6 days. There were 7 lions in the den, and every day they had been given 2 human bodies and 2 sheep.
Wow.
So they were used to a pretty ample diet. But now they were given nothing, so that they would devour Daniel.
Yeah.
Now another very curious thing comes in here. You'd expect Daniel to be rescued just as the 3 boys were rescued before. But no, the prophet Habakkuk was in Judea. He had made a stew and had broken bread into a bowl and was going into the field to take it to the reapers. But the angel of the Lord said to Habakkuk, "Take the food that you have to Babylon," to Daniel. Quite a trick. In the lion's den. Habakkuk said, "Sir, I've never seen Babylon, and I know nothing about the den." Then the angel of the Lord took him by the crown of his head and carried him by his hair with the speed of the wind and set him down in Babylon right over the den.
That sounds like Superman.
Now this sounds like, there were Habakkuk stories also,
Right.
and this is one of them. We know there are references to others, but we don't have any. But you can see it doesn't, you don't need this. The story does not demand that, this guy in Judea making a stew should be angelically transported to rescue Daniel. We already saw it was easier than that. With the 3
By
By
does-
location.
It does make the movie
Longer.
That's right.
It's interesting.
Daniel 2. Then Habakkuk shouted, "Daniel, Daniel, take the food that God has sent you." Daniel said, "You have remembered me, O God, and have not forsaken those who love you." Daniel got up and ate. I hope he gave something to the lion. And the angel of God immediately returned Habakkuk to his own place.
He wasn't gone
So
long.
why is Habakkuk there at all?
Yeah, I don't know. Habakkuk, is that Greek? Is that a Greek word? What kind
No, it's Hebrew.
Oh, it is, okay.
Google says it's 500 miles away.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's quite a trip. And it's over mountains too.
Oh, I love
On the
this.
7th day, the king came to mourn for Daniel. So the king liked Daniel. He was forced to do this. When he came to the den, he looked in, and there sat Daniel. The king shouted with a loud voice, "You are great, O Lord, the God of Daniel." So that's always the outcome. The king sees the light. And there is no other besides you. Then he pulled Daniel out and threw into the den those who had attempted his destruction. And they were instantly eaten before his eyes.
They were hungry. 7 days.
Yeah.
What a wonderful
At last.
At last.
It's a wonderful story.
People that,
So,
Daniel.
Okay.
so you can see now Daniel was a folk figure and he was used in very different kinds of literature. I mean, those
Beautiful story.
vision interpretation things, the dream things, the apocalyptic, and these kind of, you know, sci-fi detective stories. So he was very popular, and we find references to Daniel that don't tell us much, except that he was known outside Hebrew literature, in other Mesopotamian literature. So he seems to have been around as a figure of
He was for real.
esteem. He was for real, yeah.
Okay, I think that will do it with Daniel.
Is it all right if I continue to believe that miracles happen, despite the fact that these stories are obviously not exactly straight reporting? Dressed up, fleshed out, half made up. I can still believe in miracles.
If you
I
want dinky little miracles, you can.
I mean, I got things in my life I can't explain otherwise.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I think we'd all be with you on that. The prayer of Azariah, the Song of the Three Jews, is here also. It too is much older than the book of Daniel, and it contains 2 canticles. The better known one is this blessing, blessed O Lord thing. Let's just take a look at that so you get the flavor of it. This is Azariah and the Three Jews, verse 23 of chapter 1, 29.
Daniel?
No, Azariah and the Three Jews, a separate piece, like Susanna and like Bell. Blessed are you, O Lord, God of our ancestors, to be praised and mightily exalted forever. Blessed is your glorious holy name, highly praised and exalted forever. Blessed are you in the temple of your holy glory. And it goes on through all of nature. You know, blessed in the snow, blessed in the sun, blessed in the waves of the sea, and so on. I think it's a beautiful hymn.
Every Sunday morning.
Beautiful.
Every Sunday morning in the liturgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are.
Yes.
And that's where it comes from, a curious source, but a very successful piece of religious literature. Okay, we don't do anything next Thursday.
Here anyway.
We do things elsewhere. And we'll do Judith and Esther and Wisdom when we come back.
Do what?
Judith, Esther, and Wisdom of Solomon.
Can, at some point, this is all from Hebrew. Everybody spoke Hebrew?
No.
Did they speak Aramaic?
Yeah, in the time of the Maccabees, Aramaic would be what most people spoke.
And so in the translation, it's very different, or?
The translation from Aramaic into Hebrew? You mean would that change things? Yes. And people who know both languages can often detect the change.
Right, right. Yeah.
This is true also in the New Testament.
Right.
There's somebody has actually done an Aramaic version of Matthew. You know, doing it backwards.
Right.
Oh,
In
wow.
the belief that Matthew came from Aramaic, to kind of see what that would lead you to, what adjustments that would.
I've read like an Arabic version of the Lord's Prayer.
Yeah, right.
That is, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Very
Well, that Aramaic version of the Lord's Prayer is still prayed in.
yeah.
You know, there are only 2 Aramaic speaking places left,
Right.
and it's still used.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.